1980 wasn't just a year, it was a turning point. Political revolutions, musical icons lost, and nature itself unleashed chaos. It was a time of upheaval and transformation, setting the stage for a new decade. In 1980, global tensions intensified as the Iran-Iraq conflict began. Reagan denied Carter a second term, and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan led to a U.S.-led boycott of the Moscow Olympics. Meanwhile, Poland's solidarity movement gained momentum, challenging communist rule. But it wasn't all about politics. While the world watched nations collide, music and pop culture provided a different kind of revolution. On the radio, Queen dominated the airwaves with their funky as hell anthem, Another One Bites the Dust.
Ooh, another one bites the dust.
While Blondie's Call Me became a dance floor hit. Michael Jackson was also starting to leave his mark as a solo artist with Rock With You, one of the top charting songs of the year. And Pink Floyd's The Wall continued its reign, defining the progressive rock scene and expanding its influence. Equally, television in 1980 was monumental. Dallas captured the world with the iconic Who Shot JR cliffhanger, a mystery that kept millions of viewers on the edge of their seats until the answer was revealed in a record-breaking episode that still stands as one of the most watched TV moments ever. And meanwhile, the Dukes of Hazzard brought wild car chases, Southern charm to homes across America.
Hey, Robin Hood, those were supposed to be duds.
I don't think it's hardly befitting the memory of the General Jackson.
I think if the General was here, he'd like it.
We probably would.
And also made Daisy Dukes a thing. But tragedy, however, cast a really dark shadow over the music world. In February, ACDC lost their legendary frontman Bon Scott after a night of heavy drinking, leaving the band's future uncertain. And just months later, Led Zeppelin was dealt a crushing blow when John Bonham died from alcohol-related complications. And on December 8th, the unthinkable happened when John Lennon was gunned down by a psychopath outside his New York apartment. And Lennon's death was a global event, sparking grief and disbelief. Fans would gather around the world to mourn the loss of one of the greatest musical icons in history, and it really symbolized the end of an era. But in other parts of pop culture, Pac-Man Fever was sweeping the globe. Released in arcades in 1980, it quickly became one of the most successful and iconic video games of all time. And it really sparked a wave of gaming culture that would just explode. At the movies, The Empire Strikes Back hit theaters, solidifying the Star Wars franchise. And meanwhile, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining left audiences completely terrified and captivated, becoming one of the most iconic horror films ever made.
Here's Johnny.
And in the world of technology, the landscape was changing fast. IBM was preparing to release the first personal computer, marking the dawn of the PC era. Meanwhile, NASA's Voyager 1 spacecraft made its closest approach to Saturn, sending back groundbreaking images and data that expanded people's understanding of the solar system. 1980 was definitely a whirlwind, but despite all the chaos, it was a golden era for rock and metal. The music world certainly didn't slow down, and many bands delivered some of their best and most influential work during this year. Now let's dive into the top 10 albums that defined that year. Albums that weren't just successful, but actually became timeless.
Like, subscribe. Thank you.
Starting at number 10 was a band who really sort of seemed like they couldn't decide if they were pop or harder rock, Loverboy. Among all the noise going on, Loverboy, a band forged in Calgary, burst onto the scene with their self-titled debut, and it was an interesting blend of rock and pop. Released in November, Loverboy quickly soared to platinum status in the US, selling over 1 million copies in the homeland of Canada. With singles like Turn Me Loose and The Kid Is Hot Tonight, it became an instant classic. The band's formation in 1979 was born out of sheer determination. Guitarist Paul Dean, a veteran of 13 different bands, was tired of playing by the others' rules. He really wanted to do things his own way. And the name Loverboy, it wasn't actually a marketing ploy. It came from a dream that Dean had after flipping through fashion magazines with the bandmates and their girlfriends. But success for them did not come easy. Dean's manager, Lou Blair, recognized the potential and connected the band with Bruce Allen, one of Canada's most prominent rock managers. And this connection actually helped Loverboy land a huge opportunity, opening for Kiss in Vancouver. And that one performance thrust them into the spotlight. One of the album's biggest hits, Turn Me Loose, almost didn't happen, at least the way that we know it. The song started with a simple bass riff that singer Mike Reno couldn't stop playing, much to the annoyance of Paul Dean. and that frustration boiled over, leading to a breakthrough. In a moment, Dean wrote the rebellious lyric, "I'm going to do it my way or no way at all." And so it turned into what Mike Reno described as sort of a kiss-off song, but it ended up doing really well. Now, when Loverboy entered Ridge Forum Studio, they had no idea that they were working with soon-to-be rock royalty behind the scene. Producer Bruce Fairbairn, along with assistants Bob Rock and Mike Frazier, would become some of the most sought-after names in the industry. Fairbairn's meticulous approach to production left a lasting impression on Mike Reno. His methodical progress tracking, complete with a giant wall chart and gold stars marking completed tasks, kept the band motivated and focused. And the entire record was recorded in only 4 weeks. But also, the band did not have an easy time of it in terms of getting a record deal. They're rejected by U.S. labels left and right, but they finally found a home with Columbia in Canada. But the anxiety of not securing a deal hung over the band, so that they needed financing not just to record, but also to promote the album across radio and TV. But their relentless touring across the U.S., coupled with a guerrilla marketing approach, visiting radio stations in every city that they played, helped them to begin to build momentum. And fans started requesting the album that wasn't even available in the States yet. And that was really the buzz that caught the attention of Columbia's U.S. division. And really, the rest for the band is rock history. Number 9, Saxon. In 1980, metal was still undergoing a seismic shift, and Saxon was right at the heart of it. Their second album, Wheels of Steel, not only defined their career, but became a genre-defining moment in the new wave of British heavy metal movement. For Saxon, this was a make-or-break album. The debut the year before had flopped, selling only around 12,000 copies, mostly to diehard fans from their days as Son of a Bitch. Their label, Career Records, made it clear: deliver a hit or we're dropping you. So with the pressure mounting, Saxon retreated to a secluded cottage in Wales, where they'd craft a sound that would change their fortune. And the tranquility of their surroundings actually sparked creativity. Soon enough, the anthemic Wheels of Steel and 747 Strangers in the Night emerged, and these tracks would become the cornerstone of the album. With 747 drawing inspiration from a real-life 1968 blackout in New York City that had left a plane circling the sky struggling to land. Saxon's vision for Wheel of Steel was simple: harness that raw, unfiltered energy of their live performances. They wanted it loud, aggressive, and with just a touch of punk edge to set them apart from their contemporaries. Pete Hinton, the producer who initially signed them, was tasked with bringing that vision to life. Recorded at Ramport Studios, owned by none other than The Who, they crafted an album that would shake the metal world. To maximize the impact of the record on vinyl, they kept it short, just over 33 minutes, ensuring that every second counted. And it worked. When Wheels of Steel hit the shelves in February, the album stormed number 5 in the UK Albums Chart, becoming their highest charting release. Both Wheels of Steel and 747 saw major chart success, solidifying Saxon as a major force in the British metal scene. But it wasn't just the music. The breakthrough moment came with a high-profile appearance in Top of the Pops, Britain's most influential music chart show. And that single performance launched them into the public eye, pushing the album to gold status in the UK, with sales surpassing 250,000 copies. And the album also became a blueprint for a lot of metal bands, not just in the 80s, but for decades to come. Their influence extended beyond Britain. Metal bands like Hammerfall, Stratovarius, and 3 Inches of Blood citing Saxon as a major inspiration. And it also put Saxon right up there with Iron Maiden and Def Leppard as pioneers of a sound that would actually shape the future of metal. Number 8, Iron Maiden's self-titled debut, which was released on April 14, 1980, wasn't just an entry into the new wave of British heavy metal. It was a seismic event. Galloping riffs, blazing guitar harmonies, and intricate arrangements, the album elevated the genre and really set them apart from their contemporaries like Saxon and Def Leppard. It was a complex cocktail of punk-infused stormers, anthems, and rhythmically complex compositions that rivaled even the likes of Judas Priest. The energy, unmatched. The ambition, off the charts. This was Iron Maiden setting out to redefine heavy metal, and they succeeded. The recording process, however, was anything but glamorous. Maiden entered Kingsway Studios in West London in January of 1980 and hammered out an entire album in just 13 days. By February, it was mixed at Morgan Studios in northwest London. Rushed and rough, they went through 2 producers before settling on Will Malone, who whose apparent lack of enthusiasm allowed the band to take control of much of the process themselves. Steve Harris, the band's visionary and shredding bassist, was adamant about playing with his fingers instead of a pick, and that turned out to be a demand that cost one of the producers his job. And the sound, it's divisive. Some fans love that raw, almost slightly punkish edge to the album, while others, including former vocalist Paul Di'Anno, lament its lackluster production. Paul went on to say that better production could have turned it into one of the greatest albums of all time. However, despite the band's own criticisms, AllMusic acknowledged the record's punk influences, though Harris really despised everything about punk rock. But the unpolished energy worked, and that's what mattered. Di'Anno's vocal style was another unique element. His voice is raw, gritty, full of attitude, and giving songs like Running Free and Charlotte the Harlot an edge that was both punchy and aggressive. And that punk background of his was apparent, but it worked for the early era of Maiden. However, Paul's time with the band would be short-lived, where the next chapter of Maiden's vocal history would come with Bruce Dickinson, who would really propel the band to even greater heights. And then there's Eddie. The album was the world's first glimpse at Iron Maiden's legendary mascot, brought to life by artist Derek Riggs. Originally intended for a punk project, the painting, titled Electric Matthew Says Hello, featured a hairless version of Eddie, but Iron Maiden wanted something tougher, so Riggs reimagined him with wild, untamed hair, transforming Eddie into the iconic figure that we know today. Iron Maiden's debut was raw, relentless, and in many ways ahead of its time. And for Iron Maiden, it was just the beginning. And a hell of a beginning it was. Number 7, Def Leppard, On Through the Night. As a new wave of British heavy metal stormed across the UK, the young band from Sheffield called Def Leppard entered the fray with their debut album, On Through the Night. Released on March 14th, 1980, the album didn't just put Def Leppard on the map. It launched them as one of the leaders of the new wave of British heavy metal movement, which is a term that was coined just a year earlier by journalist Jeff Barton. Blending the thunderous energy of the 70s hard rock with this raw edge of punk, Def Leppard's sound stood out immediately, pushing the band into the fast lane of rock's new era. The debut wasn't entirely new material. The band had re-recorded earlier tracks like Rocks Off and Overture, which had appeared on their independently released EP. They also revisited older demos, injecting them with fresh energy in the studio. But what made the record significant wasn't just the reworks. It was the explosive vibe that pulsed through each track. And really what propelled the band a lot was its support by BBC Radio 1 DJ John Peel. Def Leppard's relentless gigging and raw energy caught the attention of Phonogram in the UK and Europe, and Mercury Records in the US. With a record deal secured, the band headed into Startling Studios, an estate owned by none other than Ringo Starr, to capture the power of their live sound. Under the guidance of producer Tom Olam, known for his work with Judas Priest, they recorded the album in a furious 2-week blitz, immediately before Christmas of 1979, with another 2 weeks spent perfecting the mix in early 1980. On Through the Night radiates this raw, unpolished energy. Tracks like Wasted, Rock Brigade, and It Could Be You are unapologetic, high-energy anthems that have enough aggressive vibe to make up for any lack of studio sophistication. Hello America, with its layered vocal harmonies, gives a nod to the one and only Queen, while the epic Overture is a bit more on the ambitious side, drawing a lot of comparisons to some of Rush's work. And in Sorrow is a Woman, we hear early traces of what would become Def Leppard's signature ballad style, setting the stage for future hits like Bringing on the Heartbreak and Love Bites. And it even did well with the critics, with some of them saying that it was really impressive for a band making its vinyl debut. And it also caught the attention of John Mutt Lange, who would soon step in to produce Def Leppard's next 3 albums, steering them towards superstardom. So while On Through the Night wasn't as slick and polished as their later records, it definitely laid the groundwork for their evolution into one of the bigger rock acts in the world. Number 6, Motorhead, Ace of Spades. In October of 1980, Motorhead unleashed an album that would forever change the landscape of heavy music. With its raw power and relentless speed, Ace of Spades became their most commercially successful release, peaking at number 4 in the UK albums chart and going gold by March of 1981. But it wasn't just the chart success that cemented its legacy, it was the sound. Ace of Spades was the soundtrack to this new era of chaos, energy, and rebellion in British heavy metal. and his title track became an anthem for an entire generation of rockers. So at the time, metal was taking off, with bands like Maiden and Saxon rising to prominence. And despite their resistance to being labeled, Motorhead, already a fixture in the rock scene with albums like Overkill and Bomber, was swept into this new movement. They weren't just participants, they were leaders. And sure, Motorhead didn't care for labels, they were simply rock and roll to the core, but their speed, aggression, and unrelenting sound set them apart. The recording sessions for Ace of Spades took place in the summer of 1980 at Jackson Studios with producer Vic Mail, a man the band affectionately nicknamed Turtle due to his resemblance to the reptile. Miles' touch brought a new level of clarity to Motorhead's signature grit. Under his watch, the band got a cleaner, yet more brutal, raw sound. And even Lemmy, the legendary bassist and vocalist, noted that Vic pushed him to sing rather than just shout, while drummer Phil "Filthy Animal" Taylor credited Mail with helping him lock in much more solid grooves. The title track, Ace of Spades, became more than just a song. It was a declaration of defiance, filled with gambling metaphors and gritty swagger. Lemmy's gravelly voice sang a poker, dice, and the infamous Dead Man's Hand, held by Wild Bill Hickok when he was brought down. And this track became the quintessential Motorhead anthem, climbing the number 15 on the UK singles chart and earning its place as one of the greatest hard rock songs of all time. And the rest of the album was no less powerful. Tracks like The Chase is Better Than the Catch, or We Are the Road Crew, were loud, fast, and unrelenting. The We Are the Road Crew was a heartfelt tribute to their roadies, who were considered to be the unsung heroes of the rock world. And according to Fast Eddie Clarke, their guitarist, the crew was proud of the song, with Lemmy writing it in just 10 minutes, bringing a tear to the eye of their roadie Ian Eagle Dobby when he first heard it. Promoting Ace of Spades was as wild as the album itself. Motorhead appeared on Top of the Pops twice in October, spreading the gospel of the chaos to the masses. They even made an appearance on the children's show Tiswas, adding a touch of surreal to their outlaw image. Their Ace Up Your Sleeve tour kicked off in October of 1980, with support from Girls' School and Vardis, but was cut short when Taylor broke his neck after the Belfast show in December. The album's artwork further solidified Motorhead's reputation as rock outlaws. Originally intended to be a feature in a sepia-toned image of gunfighters around a poker table, the final cover instead depicted the band dressed as gritty cowboys standing in the desert. Photographed in a sand pit in Barnett, each member channeled a different Western icon. Clarke as Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name, Taylor as Marlon Brando's Rio from One-Eyed Jacks, and Lemmy as Brett Maverick from Maverick. And this album actually made its way into the prestigious 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die list. And even in 2020, Rolling Stone actually ranked it number 408 on the list of 500 greatest albums of all time. Though Motorhead always maintained that they were just a rock and roll band, Ace of Spades became a cornerstone of thrash and heavy rock. Number 5, The Scorpions' Animal Magnetism, which was released in the spring of 1980. And this album is an album that fused raw power with a strange sense of allure. Dropping on March 31st, 1980, the album really built on the success of their breakout album, Love Drive, from the year before. And over the next decade, Animal Magnetism would go on to achieve gold certification in '84 and going platinum in 1991. But it wasn't just about sales. The album actually marked the Scorpions' ascent into the upper echelons of rock, blending those signature hard-edged riffs with moment of eerie melody that really made them stand out in the metal scene at the time. Recorded at Dierks Studios in West Germany and Monta Sound Studios in Toronto between October of '79 and February of 1980. Animal Magnetism was yet another collaboration with producer Dieter Dierks, who had helped shape the sound of their previous hit. And this album exhibited a lot of mystery and intensity, with tracks like The Zoo and Make It Real becoming instant live staples. But perhaps the most iconic and controversial aspect of Animal Magnetism was the album cover, designed by Storm Thorgerson of Hypnosis fame, known for his work with Pink Floyd. The cover, featuring a suggestive image of a woman kneeling in front of a man with a Doberman Pinscher between them, was considered to be fairly provocative for the time. And the bassist Francis Buchholz admitted that he wasn't a fan of the imagery, but the rest of the band embraced it. But Francis did say, "Well, I did like the dog, though." And the songs themselves were pretty diverse. Rudolf Schenker composed the bulk of the music, with standout tracks like The Zoo, driven by that unforgettable riff. And the soaring ballad Lady Starlight, which featured an orchestra and horns arranged by Alan McMillan. And this blending of hard rock intensity with these classical elements really kind of showcased the band's range and ambition during the time. Klaus Mein's lyrics for tracks like Animal Magnetism and 20th Century Man delved into themes of desire and disillusionment, while Herman Rearbell contributed both musically and lyrically with tracks like Falling in Love, adding that punchy edge to the album. However, the album didn't really storm the charts. It peaked at number 52 on the Billboard 200, but it did find a loyal audience, particularly in North America. And eventually, the album would get certified platinum in Canada, and singles like Make It Real and The Zoo kept the band's momentum going. And even the bonus track, Hey You, added in the 2001 and 2015 reissues, provided a glimpse into the band's creative process during their earlier Love Drive session, featuring Rudolph Schenker on lead vocals. Nevertheless, Animal Magnetism's unapologetic edge carved its own unique place in rock history. Number 4, Black Sabbath, Heaven and Hell. This album really marked kind of a pivotal movement for the band, but also for heavy metal itself. Heaven and Hell was Black Sabbath's 9th studio album, and it signaled the dawn of a new era, an era without Ozzy Osbourne. After parting ways with Ozzy in '79, Black Sabbath was facing an uncertain future. Could the band survive without the voice that defined them for over a decade? Well, that answer came in the form of Ronnie James Dio. Now, replacing Ozzy with Dio was a risk, but it was a move that actually paid off spectacularly. Dio, already known for his powerful operatic voice and his work with Rainbow, injected Black Sabbath with a renewed sense of energy. He didn't just step in to fill the void, he redefined the band's sound. Dio wrote the lyrics for every song on Heaven and Hell, giving the band a fresh perspective and proving that even an iconic group like Sabbath could evolve and find success with a new frontman. But the road to Heaven and Hell was far from smooth. Internally, the band was struggling. Tony Iommi, the band's legendary guitar player, seemed to be the only one not embroiled in addiction issues. And Geezer Butler was going through a divorce and initially sat out the recording sessions. Jeff Nichols, the band's keyboard player, filled in on the bass for the initial demos. At one point, Tony Iommi even considered bringing in a bass player from Frank Zappa's band after seeking advice from Zappa himself. However, Geezer would eventually return to complete the album, solidifying the lineup. And amid the chaos, there was even a claim from Craig Gruber, former bass player for Elf and Rainbow, that he had played bass and co-written several songs on the album. Gruber later retracted these claims after a financial arrangement was made with the band. So as Black Sabbath worked on Heaven and Hell, the new wave of British heavy metal was emerging, bringing this fresh intensity to rock itself. Iron Maiden, Saxon, and Def Leppard were already getting popular, but Black Sabbath with songs like Neon Nights proved that they could adapt and thrive in this new landscape. Neon Nights embraced those faster tempos and the aggressive energy of this new metal movement, blending Sabbath's signature doom-laden sound with more of an undeniable urgency. However, the recording of Heaven and Hell also saw the departure of founding drummer Bill Ward. Struggling with alcoholism and creative differences, Ward left during the album's production, admitting that fear and personal demons drove him deeper into his addiction. He would go on to say that he was completely out of his depth. Vinny Appice stepped in to finish the tour, marking yet another transition for the group. But despite all the turmoil, the Heaven and Hell tour was a success. The band hit the road in April 1980, but it wasn't always smooth sailing. Die-hard fans were missing Ozzy, and some would shout his name during the early shows. But Dio's charismatic stage presence and commanding voice eventually won them over, even the most skeptical fans, proving that Sabbath was more than just one man. The album ended up going platinum in 1986. And has since become a cornerstone in Black Sabbath's legacy. Number 3, ACDC's Back in Black. Released just 5 months and 1 day after the tragic death of Bon Scott, ACDC's Back in Black would become one of the most legendary albums in rock history, selling an astounding 50 million copies and cementing its place as one of the best-selling rock albums of all time. And the album's all-black cover wasn't just a design choice. It was a solemn tribute to Bon Scott. It was really a symbol of both the mourning and the resilience as the band faced their darkest moment. On February 19th of 1980, Bon Scott was found lifeless in a friend's car in London. I covered this in great depth a couple videos back, but basically the coroner's report was simple but devastating: acute alcohol poisoning. He was 33 years old, and for a band that was such a solid unit, Bon Scott's death was like a lightning strike to the heart of ACDC, and the shockwave hit the fans just as hard. So the band were seriously considering calling it quits, but it was actually Bon Scott's parents who urged them to continue, believing that that is something that Bon would have wanted. And that decision led them to Brian Johnson, a vocalist with a powerful, gravelly voice who had previously fronted the band Geordie. And Johnson had once performed Whole Lotta Rosie in concert, and his sheer vocal force made an impression on John Mutt Lange, who had produced Highway to Hell. Lange recommended Johnson for the job, and after an audition, it was clear that he was the man to lead AC/DC's next chapter. The band flew to Compass Point Studios in Nassau, Bahamas to begin recording Back in Black. As if the emotional weight of creating an album without Scott wasn't enough, the recording process was peppered with all sorts of strange challenges, from power outages caused by tropical storms to whispers of machete-wielding maniacs lurking on the beach. But in the middle of all the chaos, something incredible happened. The first song recorded was Back in Black. Johnson's lyrics, written as a tribute to Bon Scott, captured the band's determination to press on in the face of all this adversity. And of course, the record featured classics. You Shook Me All Night Long, Hell's Bells, and Shoot to Thrill, tracks that would go on to define AC/DC's sound. The album opens with the tolling of a massive bell and Hell's Bells, ringing out 13 times as a tribute to Bon Scott. And in true AC/DC fashion, they had a 1.5-ton bell specially cast for the live shows, making sure the tribute hit just as hard in concert as it did on record. Other songs, like Have a Drink on Me, were seen as morbidly ironic, given the way Bon Scott passed away. But Angus Young clarified that the track had been written before Scott had passed away, and that his former bandmate would have appreciated the dark humor. Released on July 21st, 1980, Back in Black was an instant phenomenon. It took just 2 weeks to reach #1 on the UK charts and spent an astonishing 13 months in the Billboard Top 10. Johnson's powerful vocals, paired with AC/DC's raw, driving sound, created a perfect storm that propelled them into global superstardom. Back in Black was more than just an album. It was a rock masterpiece that has stood the test of time. Number 2, Van Halen, Women and Children First. In 1980, Van Halen was riding high. On March 26th, they released their third studio album, Women and Children First. Unlike their previous 2 albums, Women and Children First was grittier, heavier, and unmistakably raw. Recording took just over a week, while the instrumental tracks laid down in a mere 4 days, and the vocals took another 6. True to form, the band finished and mixed the entire album in less than a month, working again with producer Ted Templeman. And the result? An explosive record with timeless tracks like And the Cradle Will Rock, Everybody Wants Some, and Romeo Delight.
I fucked up the words again.
Songs that would quickly become concert staples. And the album wasn't just about speed or riffs, it also had layer. Take Your Whiskey Home, a track dating back to 1974, showcased their much more grooving and bluesy roots, while Could This Be Magic saw Eddie venturing into uncharted territory with a slide guitar, which is something that he had reportedly never played before doing that track. And the song also featured David Lee Roth on acoustic and Nicolette Larson, known for her hit Lotta Love, on backing vocals, creating this blend of sounds that really stood out from the rest of the album's harder-edged tracks. And then there was the closer, In a Simple Rhyme, which was described as the quintessential boy meets girl anthem, albeit with a cruder, more Van Halen-esque style. Eddie himself, with his signature guitar wizardry, brought every song to life with an infectious energy that seemed almost effortless. He even borrowed an Ibanez Destroyer from Chris Holmes of Wasp, as his own had been sawed in half during a previous experiment. And that guitar became iconic, gracing the black and white album cover, which was as edgy as the music itself. Women and Children First wasn't just about technical proficiency, though. Critics often described the album as a hymn to horniness, and David Lee Roth was unapologetic about it. He summed up the album's vibe as ultra-entertaining, believing that it would propel Van Halen to new heights. While some critics found fault with Roth's flamboyance and the band's lack of subtlety, even the harshest reviews acknowledged that they were exceptionally great musicians, with Eddie Van Halen in particular drawing admiration for his killer guitar skills. And the album quickly climbed the charts, peaking at number 6, just like its predecessor, Van Halen 2. It sold over 1 million copies within 10 weeks of its release, going platinum by June of 1980. Despite mixed reviews, the album's success was undeniable. Some fans loved the band's reckless abandon, while others could not stand David Lee Roth's swagger, as evident in a letter to Cream magazine from a reader who despised David Lee Roth so much that they asked if they could write for the magazine just to voice their distaste. But that was Van Halen. Love them or hate them, they were impossible to ignore. Women and Children First captured the band at their most ferocious and fun, delivering a raw, unapologetic punch of rock and roll that would echo through the decades. Number 1, Ozzy Osbourne, Blizzard of Oz. In 1979, after years of battling addiction, Ozzy Osbourne was fired from Black Sabbath, a move that seemed to mark the end of his career. Spiraling into a self-destructive cycle of drugs and alcohol, Ozzy locked himself away in a Los Angeles hotel room, convinced that his time in music was over. It was Don Arden's daughter, Sharon, who saw something more in him. She showed up there, telling him to clean up his act, and that she would manage him and actually help revive his career. And what followed was one of the most unlikely comebacks in rock history, one that would make Ozzy even more famous as a solo artist than he had ever been with Black Sabbath. Sharon started pushing Ozzy to start auditioning musicians, and it wasn't long before he met Randy Rhoads. And at the time, Randy Rhoads was still playing with Quiet Riot, and Ozzy, strung out and not in his best state of mind, initially dismissed him, thinking that he looked like a girl. I also covered this much more in depth on my Randy Rhoads video. But nevertheless, then Rhoads picked up his guitar, and from that first note, Ozzy was blown away. Randy's virtuosic playing would become a defining moment in Ozzy's new sound, and the two quickly began to craft what would become a legendary musical partnership. Back in the UK, Ozzy teamed up with Bob Daisley, a bassist who had played with Rainbow. Daisley became a key songwriting partner, helping to anchor the group. And then they recruited drummer Lee Kerslake of Uriah Heep after cycling through several other drummers. And together they headed to Ridge Farm Studios in Surrey to record what would become Blizzard of Oz. The basic tracks were laid down live. If somebody made a mistake, they started it again. There were no studio tricks or drop-ins. Randy, ever the perfectionist, would spend hours painstakingly overdubbing rhythms and solos, sometimes tracking the same solo multiple times in order to achieve that thick, layered sound. And his primary tools were a polka dot Sandoval V and a Gibson Les Paul amplified through a 100-watt Marshall stack. And his work on tracks like D, where he used a Martin acoustic and classical guitar, showcased the depth of his talent at the time. Released in September of 1980, Blizzard of Oz was an instant success, but behind the scenes, tensions were brewing. Sharon believed that the band lacked visual appeal and wasn't right fit for Ozzy, while Daisley and Lee Kerslake claimed that they hadn't received proper contracts despite being promised a 50-50 split with Ozzy. But even amidst the internal strife, the magic of Blizzard of Oz was undeniable. The album's blend of Ozzy's raw energy and Randy Rhoads' masterful guitar work created a sound that was powerful and melodic, earning it a place as one of the greatest rock albums of all time. It marked a rebirth for Ozzy, proving that even after being cast out of Black Sabbath, he could rise again, this time as the Prince of Darkness in his own right. So as the dust of 1980 settled, one thing was clear. It had been a year of seismic shifts and explosive creativity. From political upheaval to unimaginable losses, the world was undergoing massive transformation. And rock music wasn't just a soundtrack to those changes, it was at the heart of them. ACDC rose from tragedy to release Back in Black. Ozzy Osborne, thought to be a casualty of his own demons, found new life with Blizzard of Oz. Bands like Van Halen and Iron Maiden were pushing the boundaries of sound and performance, while icons like John Bonham and Bon Scott left behind musical legacies that would forever echo through the annals of rock history. But 1980 was more than just another year, it was a turning point. It was the moment when hard rock and heavy metal solidified their place in the mainstream, taking over the airwaves and concert stages across the globe. The albums born this year would go on to inspire generations, their riffs and lyrics etched into the DNA of modern rock. And even in the face of adversity and loss, the music of 1980 thrived, proving that from chaos, greatness often emerges. And the echoes of that greatness still reverberate today. Something really weird I just found out. The most expensive guitar on Amazon is a signature guitar, and you won't believe whose signature guitar it is. I left the link below in the description. And to my subscribers, I really want to thank you so much for all the inspiration and feedback. I truly do appreciate it. And if you haven't had a chance to subscribe to this channel, make sure you smack that subscribe button. And while you're at it, hit the like button. Join the family. and want to thank you so much for watching.